Hey everyone, this is Adam Elenbaas from Nightlight Astrology, and today I am joined by my buddies Kipp and Spencer to discuss some updates in the world of sports. If you are new to this series, we like to look at the astrology of different sports teams and different athletes and different major sporting events. Take a look at astrology and its manifestations in the lives of athletes, and this is fun for us because we're sports fans and we're into astrology, but also it's been a way of connecting to a different kind of audience. There's a lot of people out there who like sports and astrology. You rarely see them put together. And also we've had a lot of people say that, hey, I'm able to get my husband into astrology because of this show. So that's been a bonus, trying to maybe bring in a little bit more men to the audience, which is always cool. So today we are going to be looking at a variety of different things. We're going to look at some NFL astrology updates, some NBA astrology updates. We've got a few other miscellaneous things we're going to look at that were really interesting. So that is our agenda for today. But before we get into it, as always, don't forget to like and subscribe. Share your comments in the comment section. It really helps the channel to grow. Make sure that you, if you want a transcript of today's talk, you can find it on the website, I should say, nightlightastrology.com. Also, right now, we're in the middle of enrollment season. So if you pop over to nightlightastrology.com and click on the courses page, you can take a look at the first year program that starts in June. Learn all about it over there. And if you have any questions about the course or signing up for it, email us info@nightlightastrology.com. We'd love to see you in class. There are need-based tuition contracts available for that program. So if you go to the bottom of the enrollment pages, any of the enrollment pages for our upcoming classes, you'll see a need-based tuition option. Please feel free to take advantage of that if you really want to study astrology, but for one reason or another, maybe you're in a tight spot financially and you might need a little help to make that happen. See if you qualify by looking at the instructions there on the page, and just send us an application. We'd love to work with you. All right, so that's what I've got. I'm glad to bring my friends Kipp and Spencer back onto the show. Hey guys,
how's it going?
Hey everybody.
Good. Really stoked to get back into it. So it's been a while since we've met. Things got a little busy. We traveled a little bit for the kids' spring break, and that sort of set us back. But it's also kind of like it's a little quiet. Like we had the excitement of March Madness, and now the NFL draft is coming up. Free agency. We could have done an episode probably right around free agency that would have been really interesting. But the NFL season's been quiet. You've been coming down the home stretch of the NBA season. We're just turning the corner into the playoffs. You know, baseball season has just started. The games, by the way, that's interesting. The games are significantly faster now. They have this pitch clock. Have you guys watched them at all?
Baseball lost me a while back.
Yeah. Well, it's actually like, you know, I sat down and watched a game the other night, and it was about an hour and 50 minutes, which is, nice. I think the average was like 3 hours. So they've cut the time down significantly. They also have some interesting rules that they put in. Like one rule that they put in last year is that if it goes to extra innings, you start the extra inning with a man on second.
Oh,
wow.
So that's really interesting. They also shortened the base length slightly so that stealing is a little bit easier. And they also are no longer allowing the shift, which means that you can't like basically cover up certain areas to, take care of statistical likelihoods that a person's going to hit in a certain direction and make it almost impossible to get a hit in that direction. So they banned that, which means that there's a lot more hits and stuff like that. So as a baseball fan, I feel like my hope in my love of baseball has been like dwindling, but these new rules are honestly like, pretty cool. In fact, the one thing that they had to do, which was interesting, was they had to adjust for concession sales because the games are so fast now that they had to allow the concessions guys to sell through the whole game or through the 8th inning now or something like that. So it's been interesting to see the news happening there. But yeah, I think we'll start with. Should we start with some NFL astrology updates? What do you guys think?
Sure.
That sounds great. I want to start this, though, by making sure we pat ourselves in the back because we did the Super Bowl last time. All three of us took Kansas City. Was not unanimous. The betting lines were really, really tight, and we nailed it. So good job, gentlemen.
And that was the thing that I will also say about that game, that was really incredible. In addition to Spencer's, streak now of using the South Node technique, which was pretty cool, was that we made some comments about what Rihanna's halftime show was likely to do or be. We were like, it's going to be, colorful and provocative in some way because of the heavy Uranus signature and Moon and Scorpio signature and all of that. And she came out and made it known that she was pregnant. Like that was like part of the artistic statement of the show, which was like, I think we had said that we thought maybe it would be like a political statement or, something like that. That was surprising.
I think that is political, though. I mean, the notion that someone is on the biggest stage, maybe for any musician of the entire year worldwide, who comes out and does that show pregnant, I think that was really something. And maybe because we've seen it a bit now, but I mean, I remember when Ali Wong came out and did her first stand-up routine, her special pregnant. It was huge. Like in that. Number one, her stand-up is extremely dirty. And so I thought that was really cool that she's being motherly and really filthy.
Right.
But also, it's like she's taken center stage and she's like, this is just part of my life. The life cycle's happening and I'm kicking butt. And I think that's kind of what Rihanna did.
That's a great point. Yeah, it was so Moon and Scorpio opposite Uranus and Taurus. It was like the perfect expression of that. And you're right, it is a kind of political statement. Yeah, that was amazing. And the game was close. And God, I was like 2 seconds away from feeling like I had made the most amazing prediction of my astrological life with the backup. What was his name?
Chad Henne.
Chad Henne. I thought about that the whole game.
Yeah, that was good.
Dude, and he almost had to come in because Patrick Mahomes got injured early on and was like hobbling, and everyone was like, Chad Henne was like throwing on the sideline, and they were showing him, and I was like, oh my God, it's going to happen. I don't even care about the outcome of the game. But then Spencer pointed out to me that right after the game, he announced on live television that he was retiring.
He retired.
So there's the Uranian moment. I mean, that was so it was just really profound. I was like, wow, it's never exactly what you expect, but it's pretty cool that we can see those signatures and talk about them and then watch them come to pass in some way.
I do feel like calling the two Super Bowl participants and the winner correctly in like the beginning of November was probably one of my best predictions that I've made with astrology.
True. And I, at the same time, it must have felt extra special to dunk on all those Philly fans. All love to Phillies fans.
They gave me a lot of crap for making that prediction.
I know, man.
and I will admit, there is always an element of luck involved with all of this. So right. I don't want to toot my own horn too much about it because they were pretty good teams at the time. But I don't know, man. I don't know if people were calling exactly those two teams, and people definitely weren't calling for KC to win that game.
No,
so
I think the Bills were probably one of the heavy favorites.
Yeah.
I mean, Kansas City's always up there, but it was still, you picked both teams, picked them far in advance. You had good reasoning behind it. I was saying you should get a little angel release going. You can't see me. So,
well,
anyway,
those Philly fans, man. Like I said, so I don't get murdered if I ever go to Philadelphia, is that I do respect the passion of fans of teams like that are really excited, but they could have been a little bit nicer to me online, is what I'll say.
I will say, I know because I was on the East Coast for a while, so I had a chance to meet and know a lot of Philly fans, and I think it's always the worst among us, that end up somehow becoming the caricature of what people think about all of us in groups like that. I've many times I've met people who think that Vikings fans all wear horn helmets and just drink, out of huge gallon jugs of beer or something too. So there's always stereotypes and images that come to our head, and Philly fans, the unfortunate stereotype is that they're all going to beat you and but they are really passionate, wonderful fans.
Although I will say, Adam, I do sort of have a small regret for not putting a stack on my feelings. Which was one of the comments I got. Right, that I could have been like, instead of this, I could have been like
yeah, totally. Well, what's new in the world of the NFL? We've got the draft coming up. Free agency was interesting. Lamar Jackson needs, I don't know, there's a whole conspiracy going down. I want to bring up his chart too, but there's a lot of stuff happening with the draft upcoming. Do you guys want to start there? Where do you guys want to start?
Yeah,
we might as well. Here, let me share. I've got let's see.
I mean, the biggest non-draft story is just the trade that isn't happening right now, right? So we'll probably touch on the Aaron Rodgers thing too, I'm sure.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, it should pop up.
Okay, let me add it to the stream.
There
This
we
is the NFL draft chart. Is that right?
Well, what this is I have a few of the quarterbacks, and we have a rare draft without a ton of what we call blue chippers, meaning guys that are so good you have to take them first. And oftentimes, that's a quarterback. Again, in sports, the quarterback is the number one driver of the entire team. And we have 4 quarterbacks that are all kind of up for being the top pick. And so I just pulled up a couple of them. I do have a prediction for the guy that's going to go first, and that's that gentleman is up now, and that's Bryce Young. One of the reasons.
Hey, Kip, hold on a second. Where do you have the draft location?
Oh, sorry, that's a great question.
Yeah.
So because I'm using the same chart for all of these, the draft is inside. Oftentimes when I'm looking at dual wheel charts, I'll put the event on the outside and the person on the inside, but because they're all using the exact same day and time. And so for that, it's in Las Vegas, Nevada. It's at 5 p.m. and it's April 28th.
Is it though? Because I feel like the draft is in Kansas City this year.
Oh, did I look up last year's date and time?
It's on the 27th.
Yeah, it's on the 27th.
I used
Thursday the 27th.
last year's time for the draft for all my things.
Yeah.
Okay.
No worries. I mean, we did this. I did that before too.
But how did I? Oh, because it's so basically it's just off by an hour. So I'm looking at, did I use 2022 too? But I did not. Almost everything is going to be identical, other than the moon, which didn't factor into any.
That's fine.
With Bryce Young, the things that are important, and actually kind of the way, if the draft is a day earlier, it doesn't really hurt this at all. With Bryce Young, what you're going to see Venus return almost to the dot. You're going to see natal Jupiter in Cancer. And I've noticed looking at athletes that when those benefics are in good positions, that oftentimes is really, it's a boon for that athlete's career. Getting back to Bryce Young, though, Bryce Young is tiny. Bryce Young's 5'10", he weighed 200 pounds at the combine, but most folks feel like he's going to play at 190. Both of those sizes for an NFL QB, who I think average like 6'3", 220. I mean, he's significantly smaller than the ideal. And if that has nothing to do with anything else, it's those guys get hit. And so to stick around 30 pounds less than most of your contemporaries, the chance of getting injured or just become high, and it's unlikely to get picked. So if this guy were 6'4" and weighed 220, he'd be such an obvious first overall pick. It'd be unbelievable. But here you see natal Jupiter, natal North Node, trining, transiting Saturn. You see the Venus return. You have natal natal Sun opposite Pluto, which is oftentimes considered to be a powerhouse. And the TransLink group of planets, including this Mercury retrograde, which we'll probably discuss more than once, is both not getting in the way, but also is kind of nestled into his chart in a comfortable way. Then we get to CJ Stroud, oftentimes thought of as the second best guy. I think CJ might actually have he might have a tougher draft than some might figure on, and that's for 2 reasons. One, we're having the Mars opposition, so the 2 malefics, they can make things soar when we have Mars opposite Mars. But also, if you notice, all of his main personal planets, you got Mars, you got Venus, you got Jupiter, you got Saturn. Those are all making contact either one way or another with this Mercury retrograde, which kind of makes me think 2 things. Number one, things might go not as planned for CJ, but also, and I think someone said this pregame, if there's a guy that might end up in a position where someone trades for him, where there's some kind of delay and you don't really know what's going on, and maybe it takes longer than it's supposed to get the card in because there's been some shuffling around or some technical difficulties figuring out what's going on. I think CJ is in a great spot for that. And I don't necessarily think that process hurts CJ, because if you see, you have that Mercury retrograde configured to CJ's natal Venus. It's actually in mutual reception between Venus and Mercury here in Taurus. So Venus in Virgo, Mercury in Taurus. But I think that's where you see the shuffling. The other one I think that's a really interesting chart for the quarterbacks is Anthony Richardson, a guy who was not all that successful in college, is an unbelievable off the charts athlete. You guys have probably both heard about his astounding combine, right?
Mm-hmm.
Huge, strong, fast, powerful, really raw. If you look at this chart, you see a lot of configurations that match up to having a great day. You see natal Jupiter configured to transiting Venus. You see some surprising things. We have a configuration where the natal Mercury is configured to transiting Uranus. And I think now we're at the point in the draft process where that isn't him going high is not too surprising of an event. But if you would have said that this is a guy that could go in the top 5 before the draft process started, I think that would have been pretty astounding. Just 2 more things I wanted to talk about. I have a couple of charts pulled up here that aren't that interesting. Bijan Robinson, this is a guy who's a running back. Across the board, people who evaluate the draft think that Bijan Robinson, talent-wise, is a top 5 guy. However, running backs are a position that are really devalued. Some things about Bijan Robinson that I just want to talk about just really briefly is I think he's going to be really, really good. You see a guy who in his natal chart has a configuration between Mars and Jupiter, oftentimes thought of like a warlike disposition. But you also see that Mars in an exact sextile with Saturn. And when I see a positive configuration between Mars and Saturn, the first thing I think is when I see Mars and Saturn in a negative or conflicting configuration, I think both the gas and the brake pushed at the same time. And when I see the Mars in a positive configuration, I see rocks rolling down hills or like a snowball rolling down the mountain and gaining momentum. And I think when you have a guy who has tons of gas, has tons of good fortune, and you see this stuff configured together, consider an extremely talented guy. I think this is he's going to be really, really good. This day doesn't look particularly benefic for him. I don't think he's going to something like lightning's going to strike and he's suddenly going to arrive at the top of the draft, which no one thought. But I think Bijan Robinson's going to be great. That's a great chart for a running back. And I think, as everyone on this podcast can attest, I'm always right about running backs when it comes to the NFL. I never mess up. And so take it to the bank. Finally, we have Jalen Carter, a guy who's thought of to be a top 5 talent, maybe the best talent in the draft. He was a defensive lineman in college. Really, really good. The guys that people comp this guy to are all Hall of Famers. Had a really sticky pre-draft process where he ended up getting arrested, but it was for weird, like driving too fast charges. Nothing violent, nothing. They're red flags because this guy's not minding his P's and Q's, but not stuff you want to have come up. It's not the conversation. What you want to have the conversation about is this guy's a super hard worker, always shows up because 150%. So it makes his draft stock muddied. Like we can't see clearly when it comes to Jalen Carter's draft stock. And if you look at Jalen Carter's chart, you see here is Neptune. Neptune is configured to Saturn natally. If you see transiting Neptune right here, you see the transiting Neptune is configured to a bunch of stuff going on in his natal chart, almost exactly on top of, and if this is one day earlier, it will be exactly on top of natal Mercury. So communication about this guy is foggy. He doesn't really know where it's going. There's just a ton of Neptunian stuff going on, which is it's not the most fun position when the biggest day of this young man's life up till now is happening right at or around this date. But what you'd think you're going to find with a guy who what we know about him, what we expect things to happen is way up in the air. It's not really clear to us. So those are just a couple of draft notes. I know, and I'm very excited to listen to our next commentary. Do you want me to? Do I have to stop sharing, or can you switch it?
I think I can. Yeah, I can stop it.
Awesome.
Yeah, I really, when we've talked about quarterbacks in the past, we've seen a couple charts that have had really good fortune. Like we've talked about Tom Brady's chart. We've talked about Patrick Mahomes having like a juice chart. That's something I think you pointed out that was really cool, is that Bryce Young has probably the best chart out of all of these quarterbacks. I don't even think it's really debatable. He has really good fortune in his chart. So if we were advising NFL GMs, we'd probably be like, yeah, he's a little short, but don't count this guy out. Like he's going to have some good luck and some good fortune, and his makeup is going to be top notch, I guess, is what I would say.
And oftentimes when I think about those places in people's charts that are like good luck charms or really benefic placements, I think there are going to be times in this person's career where those are just going to explode.
Yeah.
There'll be benefic configurations to them, and it's just going to be a really great day.
And I have a feeling too, Jalen Carter is not going to fall very far at all. Like I don't think, for the most part, from my understanding, is that NFL GMs aren't looking at like Mercury and Pisces and be like, well, maybe he's has some processing trouble or something like that. They're like, oh my God, this guy is a beast, and yeah, maybe he did some stupid things, but we can't pass on this generational defensive lineman. Do you know what I'm saying?
It also sounds like true knucklehead stuff, not like stuff that's gross. Yeah. Like sometimes it's just gross.
Well, I think he showed up to his pro day sort of out of shape too, if I remember correctly. Mm-hmm. And then the other thing was that someone died in the accident that was associated with the speeding or whatever. So It was like, there's something about that probably has him dropping on some boards, but with the NFL, it's like, it's not going to drop on that many people's boards. They're going to, like if Deshaun Watson gets a job, Jalen Carter's getting a job. So
there you go.
Yeah. Too many examples to not be depressing.
Right. Yeah. Right. One quarterback, if you guys don't mind, I'll just throw up a chart really quick. Or actually, Spencer, you're about to dive in. You go for it.
Sure. Yeah. Let me share my screen here. Hold on a second. Patience. Okay, so here's my chart for the NFL draft. And I didn't mean to call you out like Kipp.
By the way, it's kind of hysterical to mix up Kansas City and Las Vegas. Such similar places.
Right. I did a similar thing on one of the last shows where I had the time zone completely like off, and it doesn't change the chart too much, especially when we're working with untimed charts for the athletes. Mm-hmm. We're looking in broader strokes anyway. But so I have 7 p.m. Central for Kansas City on the 27th, which is Thursday. And you see you've got a 25-degree Libra rising with Venus in Gemini. So, I mean, there's a couple things we can discern from that. I'm also keeping in mind that we have the MC at 28 Cancer. So the things that I was pulling up about the draft, first of all, Mercury retrograde, you all were mentioning, well, I thought that there could be some delays in the picks being made. Like, I think that these teams are going to take all of their clock on the picks in particular. And we could see a lot of trades and a lot of movement. Just some confusion though too, because Mercury is hanging out with Uranus, or some shocking movement as well potentially. Mm-hmm. With this chart, I was starting to look at the Aaron Rodgers situation, because our friend Aaron Rodgers, his chart is on the outer ring. The chart of the beginning of the draft is in the inner ring. It's been a standoff. So we've had a whole, as a Packers fan, I've been following along on Twitter and all the articles, and I think all the journalists are pretty tired of the whole situation at this point. As a fan, I'm kind of like, let's just get on with it. This is ridiculous. But here's how it stands at this point. I'll give you a little bit of a timeline. Rodgers goes into his darkness retreat, because we haven't talked about this yet at all. So Rodgers goes into his darkness retreat, and apparently has zero communication with the Green Bay Packers about what he intends to do for his future. And it comes out later that Brian Gutekunst, the GM of the Green Bay Packers, was like, hey, I need to know what you are thinking. What is your intentions? And Rodgers completely ghosted him. That's what Gutekunst has been telling reporters, is that we tried to reach out to him. He didn't even respond to any of our texts since the end of the season, even though Rodgers went on Pat McAfee and was like, I just want communication with the front office and things like that and all this and that. So Gutekunst started shopping him, and Rodgers got wind of this, and apparently was 90% leaning towards retirement. But when he got wind that someone was trying to, do him wrong, he wanted to return out of spite and stick it to the Packers. And he only wants to play for the Jets, and had a meeting with him. The Jets brain trust, their owner, their GM, their coach, their offensive coordinator, who used to be Aaron Rodgers' offensive coordinator, flew out to Malibu, had lunch with Rodgers, and like tried to seal the deal. Well, apparently none of them had a deal in place. Like generally, before you'd rush your entire brain trust out there, you'd have a deal in place with the other team, but they didn't have anything like that. So they've been having this standoff about their compensation for Rodgers, and there's a number of reasons for this. The one reason is that, first of all, Brian Gutekunst of the Green Bay Packers feels that Aaron Rodgers is worth at least a first-round pick, similar to what some of the quarterbacks in the past few years who have been traded are worth. The problem with that, from the Jets' perspective, number one, is that Aaron Rodgers went on a national syndicated podcast which had 500,000 viewers viewing live. I was there. 500,000 live viewers were watching Rodgers on McAfee.
I just want to hold on just really quick.
Yeah.
I'm just going to put up a picture of Aaron while we're speaking.
TV shows don't.
Yeah,
he does look just like him.
500,000. So as we were mentioning, this is the new villain, I don't know, in Ted Lasso.
He's the new character in Ted Lasso who has a top bun and tries to get the team to meditate, and he's a high maintenance rock star of soccer.
It's very funny.
And he's very clearly, like, everyone's talking about the fact that it's like, oh, it's Aaron Rodgers.
And here's the thing. He signs with the Richmond team in Ted Lasso, spoiler alert, because the owner went to him and just chewed him out, and he was like, well, I'm gonna come. Yeah, exactly, for being fake. And so he basically joined Richmond just to spite everyone in the media and stuff like that. So it's almost exactly the same.
It's hilarious.
So, from the Jets' perspective, they're like, we don't want to give up a lot of draft capital for a guy that might only be here for 1 year. We want some protections as far as you giving us a draft pick back, and everybody's trying to play hardball with one another. And the big buzzword with all of this has been, who has the leverage and all of this, and it's been this huge back and forth. The biggest problem with Aaron Rodgers right now, honestly, and with the deal, in my opinion, is that Aaron Rodgers is owed a shit ton of money, for the next few years, like $60 million next year alone. And the Jets are going to have to pick up a huge amount of that tab. And the Packers really want to get out of that money and that contract. And if he's traded before June 1st, all of his salary cap hit to the Packers, which is only $40 million because of the way that they prorated his signing bonus and et cetera, will all amortize, I guess. Is that the word? Is that the correct word?
You would know, Spencer. You've been doing a lot of research. I'm just kidding.
This is my team too.
If this
is my team. This is my
team. I would do
team.
the exact same thing. I'm just giving you crap.
So the entire salary cap hit will be off the books in 2023. Whereas if he's traded after June 1st, it will be spread out over 3 years or something like that.
I think that actually means it won't amortize.
Okay. Well, the main point of that is that they will take the entire blow this year if they get it done soon, and they will free up salary cap space for the future, which is what I assume that they would want to do. And they want to get draft capital in this draft to be able to support Jordan Love in his journey. Now, back to the chart of the NFL draft. What I find very interesting about this is that, people are like, when's the trade going to go down? Oh, now it'll go down by the draft and all this and that. I do think the trade will go down at the draft. And I think that Aaron Rodgers, Brian Gutekunst, and Joe Douglas are going to be the people that are going to be talked about the most at this draft. First of all, Aaron Rodgers' natal Venus is exactly conjunct the ascendant of the NFL draft start time. So there is a good reason that he is going to be in the spotlight for this particular time. We also have his natal ascendant is going to be very close to the north node and the sun of the chart. He's got all sorts of contacts with this particular time in the chart. If I pull up Gutekunst's chart, so I'm going to look at Gutekunst and Douglas's chart here as well.
Gutekunst being the GM for the Packers.
Right. So this is Brian Gutekunst, July 19th, 1973, Raleigh, North Carolina, GM of the Green Bay Packers. You can see that he has the sun and Mercury almost exactly on the midheaven of this chart of the beginning of the NFL draft. So he has some very important, prominent placement. He is going to be very visible at this particular draft. I would say that the other thing that we're seeing in his contacts is that there is an opposition between the sun, with his natal Jupiter and the moon of the chart. So there's something that's coming to fruition potentially with his particular chart around this time as well. And then if we look also at Joe Douglas, now I want you to keep in mind, when we're thinking about negotiating tactics, these two GMs have almost the exact same natal sun. And Brian Gutekunst has a Cancer sun with a Pisces moon, and Joe Douglas has a Cancer sun, so he will also be very visible with the contact with the sun to the native midheaven at 28 degrees exactly. But he has the moon, give or take a few degrees, in Taurus, exactly on the Mercury retrograde, okay? So I think, number one, that tells me that of the two, Joe Douglas is probably slightly more stuck in his position, like with having the moon in Taurus versus Gutekunst having the moon in Pisces. I mean, that's maybe making an assumption, but having a fixed moon, maybe like, oh, I'm going to be very entrenched in my position. I think also Douglas has a number of squares to his Leo stellium around this period of time too. I just don't know if Joe Douglas is going to get exactly what he wants. I think that he's probably going to have to take a deal to get a deal done. But this is also coming from a slightly subjective Packers fan perspective, so take that part with a grain of salt, if you will. But I do think that seeing Douglas have a contact with the Mercury retrograde and having Gutekunst have a little bit more contact with maybe less challenging planets in the chart might suggest that maybe Joe Douglas finally caves to the demands of the Packers.
Which I think could happen on draft night.
I definitely think that if it happens anytime soon, it will happen on draft night. I think that if it doesn't happen on draft night, then the whole dynamic changes. The Packers could sit on Aaron Rodgers all the way until the first game of the season because they very cleverly crafted his signing bonus to not be able to activate until the first game of the season. So they will have to pay him. David Bakhtiari, you guys should listen to this. This is really interesting. David Bakhtiari, the offensive lineman, the left tackle for the Packers, joined Bussin' with the Boys. Are you familiar with that podcast?
Yeah. Yep.
Taylor Lewan and Will Compton, and really gave us some really interesting insights just on the NFL Players Association, life inside the NFL. But he basically suggested that if this doesn't get done by the draft, the Packers will have no problem sitting Rodgers on the sideline and just being like, screw you, like, we'll just eat this money. We're going with Rodgers, or we're going with Love, sorry. And Rodgers is just going to sit. So it sounds like he has a little bit of an inside track into their mindset where you're either going to make us a deal that we want by the draft or, screw you, we'll just sit him down. We're ready to pay that money and you don't have a quarterback. Whereas the Packers have a quarterback ready to go. They could ostensibly afford to let, Rodgers just sit and play Love. It wouldn't be ideal. Rodgers would make a horrible, dramatic scene about it probably, but I don't know.
It would be like, what would really suck is if they started Love and Love sucked and they've benched Rodgers and then Rodgers refuses to play or something.
It would be the height of NFL drama. As a Packers fan, I hope it gets done so we can just move forward with the new era of whatever that is. But I'm not surprised that it is this sticky, just because anything involving Aaron Rodgers at this point becomes very complicated just due to his own, I don't know, due to maybe his karma in the chart or his placements, you know.
I think that from everything you said and from looking at these charts, I think you're 100% right that these three gentlemen are going to have a lot of dialogue about them during prime time.
Mm-hmm.
I think from looking at all this, the part that's most interesting to me is that clearly it's the benefic transits from that day just are all nailing Aaron Rodgers in nice spots. And it'll be really interesting to play out. Let's say Joe Douglas, that what this chart tells us is that he's super stubborn and he doesn't want to do it. So he doesn't do it because there's a lot of stubbornness in this chart for him.
Sure.
Somehow that's going to be good for Aaron Rodgers. And I have no idea what that means, you know? So I'm like, where maybe Tampa Bay after the draft decides, you know, we had a high pick this year. And so we're going to trade for Aaron Rodgers with our 1 first next year. And he gets to go to a team ready-made for a star QB. I'm just making that up. I've heard no such thing from anyone.
That would be amazing to see the Jets just totally like blow it.
Like, it would be so the Jets.
It would be so Jets.
Alan Lazard.
You're right. The Jets have done everything in their power to convince Rodgers to come, from hiring his offensive coordinator, signing his favorite receiver. I mean, there's so many things that they've done to bend over backwards to have the privilege of paying him $60 million for like maybe a year. Honestly, if I were the Jets, and I'm a sort of a Rodgers fan, I've soured on him a little bit lately, but I think it's a really dumb move for the Jets, to be honest with you. I think it's very short-sighted.
Plus, Aaron Rodgers in the New York media. I mean, he's struggling with too much attention in Green Bay.
Oh my God, that will be worth the price of admission, though. Seeing how that.
Speaking of NFL drama, that would be fun.
That would be crazy.
I'm going to just do a little interlude here and pop up Lamar Jackson's chart just real quick to add into the QB drama in the offseason. One thing that's really interesting to me is that when you look at the draft on the 27th, Neptune is coming to within minutes of the exact square to his Venus Moon conjunction. So let's see if I can actually, maybe I can draw this out here. But there's Neptune hitting Moon and Venus. And if you guys remember at the beginning of the season, when we were looking at overviews for the season, I said that I was worried about him getting injured and him being in the midst of this big contract dispute and how that could affect the injury. Well, he recently said that he recently responded to people saying, well, you know, you could have come back and played sooner than you did. And he was like, yeah, but I'm in this contract pickle. So what would you do? You know? And so it was kind of cool because I felt like, oh, well, there's one of my predictions. That was go me. But then, you know, I think it's interesting that this Neptune dynamic is coming around right at the time of the draft. So could we see some kind of movement? You know, they just signed Odell Beckham Jr. There's been some rumors that was done to try to please Lamar. I don't know if he has any desire or intention. It doesn't sound like he does. He requested a trade officially like early March. So I think this could be another draft night debacle somehow. It doesn't perfect until shortly after the draft. I think it's like May 2nd that it actually perfects to Venus. So either at the time of the draft or maybe shortly after the draft, a lot of things start happening. Maybe
look at Mars in this chart too, Adam.
Yeah.
Mars opposition with the sun.
And Uranus, transiting Uranus, really configured closely. Does he do something stupid? Are we looking at him doing something stupid?
Yeah, I mean, maybe. I mean, I personally, this is just my personal opinion. I don't mean to offer any judgment because I really don't know enough to have a judgment. But I can't help but think, dude, get an agent. What are you doing?
Right.
I mean, I understand that they probably take some of the money and maybe you don't trust them or something. But like, you know, these owners are basically conspiring in part because you don't have an agent, in part because they don't want to rematch a contract of the size and guarantee level of Deshaun Watson's, which it's been rumored that he wanted that, although I think he refuted it. But my point is just that, like, I don't know, it just feels like you're it's like someone in a really high stakes court case going in and saying, I'll just represent myself. It's like, woo. I mean,
and Adam, think of it like this. if he had an agent, maybe he'd have to give them 10% of what, $200 million, but he'd still have $180 million left over. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like
Well, to be fair, I believe, because I saw a whole thing on this one time. I mean, it's generational money. They'll only get that paycheck like once or maybe twice in their life. If they'll get like a huge, most NFL players will have one, maybe two contracts. This is his biggest contract that he's likely to get. You get, I mean, depending on your accountant and how you invest and stuff, but I mean, just straight up, 180 at the tax bracket that he's at is going to be down to 90 because it's about 50%, right? So it's like you win the lotto and people say, oh, I won $20 million. Well, you just won 10 after taxes, right? So, and not that, I mean, for us, like $10 million would be like, well, okay, too bad. I won $10 million and not 20. I mean, who cares? But I think for these players, between lifestyle and what they hope to do for families and generations of people and stuff like that, and a lot of the times, I heard this on some podcasts I listened to, the way that they're given business advice is like, look, these people don't care about you. Absolutely get as much money as you can because nobody cares about you but you. But that's also why, in my opinion, you should probably have an agent that cares about you too, because they know how to work these power dynamics in some ways just better than I think players do, unfortunately. And I've heard a lot of players on podcasts say that while also trying to be like, I support, Lamar doing what he wants to do. And, but yeah, it's a tricky situation. It feels like the very boundary blurring thing that you would expect from Neptune, Venus, and the moon as well.
Yeah, Jupiter square here too. And Jupiter
just
square
couldn't agree with you more. And I feel like he's not going to invest the money himself, right? He's going to hopefully he's not going to just throw it into like a Robinhood account and start chinging it. He's going to actually find some
crypto.
And I feel like having representation to negotiate the contract, especially in his position, if he were like a slotted rookie who is only going to get so much, then I get it. But then when he demanded a trade, the whole point of having Bill Duffy, just to name some NFL agent or whatever, is that guy knows every single GM and immediately knows what they're going to trade for him. And he is bargaining with leverage that Bill Duffy's built up through an entire career of his work, just like Lamar Jackson is negotiating with, 5 years of being an elite NFL quarterback. It's that you're utilizing your skills and abilities in the best possible way. And he's just chosen to not hire a quarterback for his corporation.
Yeah.
And just have like the running back take direct snaps.
But
I just don't get it.
And think about this too, Adam. Look at his Mars-Saturn opposition in his natal chart. I mean, he has Saturn on the South Node in Aries. Like, it's important for him maybe to reduce his stubbornness around having to do everything himself, right? And maybe increase his ability to allow someone to help him.
To advocate or like.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So yeah. I think.
You hear Spencer Lamar? You should hire Spencer to be your astrologer.
That's right.
Right.
That's right. My commission is far less than an agent.
No kidding.
Well, and here's the other thing, Lamar. Like, if you don't trust an agent, then what's going to stop you from like trying to invest all your money yourself in the stock market because you don't trust a financial advisor? Which,
yeah, I mean, exactly. The truth is, as far as I can tell from just what I've learned about the world at this stage in life, is that the more that people get into the world of money, like more money than I've ever known. So I'm not speaking from personal experience, but just observing and learning that it's like it takes a lot of money to earn money when you get to a certain level of money. And that's just like you're going to invest, you're going to pay someone a portion of what you're getting back. You're going to make a super deal as an actor in Hollywood. I've had clients, they pay agents like there's so it's I remember like the famous Minnesota icon, of course, who had a huge issue with this was Prince. It's like, musicians should have the rights to their own music, and there shouldn't be someone coming in just because you're talented. There shouldn't be like a host of vultures sitting on the side of the road being, okay, good. How much of this guy's, talent and resources can we take just because we're in a system that, privileges all the people who have the power and the wealth already, and newcomers have to take chunks out of their flesh to play, and like that sucks. So I hear him, but also like, I don't know if you're going to change the system, man,
Yep.
And similarly, kind of to buttress my argument about these folks using their skills and abilities and being the quarterback, they also have reputations that they're upholding. And the GM's reputation is that I am driving a tough bargain. If
Right.
Bill Duffy screws, and I'm sorry, Bill, if you're listening, I don't mean to call you out, but if Bill Duffy screws Lamar Jackson, then Bill Duffy's not going to get the next super quarterback who's signing a new contract, right? He's leveraging multiple points of these other professionals' expertise, careers, reputations. And he just decided that he's smarter than everyone else, which I guess, if I were Lamar Jackson, I'd think I was pretty awesome too. So that part, can't really speak to that.
And honestly, the real villain here are the Cleveland Browns.
Yeah, true.
Because they went out and gave a rapist a fully guaranteed $250 million contract and completely shifted and kind of screwed up all the normal dynamics in place for NFL contracts. So I don't blame Lamar for being like, well, I'm a decent human being who's more talented than this guy. You should give me at least
an MVP.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Who's young and MVP. I should get at least what this guy got. So I don't blame him for that, to be honest with you. But I do think that the part about having to do it himself without help is hurting him at this point.
Yeah, it's funny that there's also this active conspiracy among NFL owners. Oh, nobody's interested in Lamar, although he has the potential to have, as a restricted free agent, I believe it is, he has the right to get offers from other teams, which his team can match. Nobody's giving him any offers, apparently. And it's like, well, when you're asking for this kind of deal, you want to leave your team, you don't have an agent, blah, blah, blah. It's like, yeah, the owners talk, and they're probably enough of them that are like, we got you, Baltimore. We're not doing a thing, which is unfortunate. And but that's also partly what can happen, I think, when you don't have an agent too. So it's like,
hopefully Lamar doesn't try to file the class action by himself.
Yeah, geez. Well, did you have anything else you wanted to add, Spencer, about the NFL before we move on to some other stuff?
I don't think so. I just think the other interesting thing was just the Odell signing by Baltimore. They gave him a huge contract. They gave him a $15 million one-year contract that could escalate to $18 million a year for an old receiver that's coming off an ACL injury. And Odell Beckham is a Scorpio sun, and he got that contract with Mars and cancer. So I don't know if that's going to work out the way that they hope it is. I think they'd be lucky if they got average production from Odell.
Yeah. I was really surprised that he didn't go to a contender. Like, I figured him for more of I want to win a ring at this point guy than I want to get another big paycheck. But I don't know. You can't blame someone for wanting a big paycheck either.
Sure.
But this is a chart I wanted to visit really quickly in my own fantasies of big things happening on draft night. This is Kevin O'Connell's chart, the head coach of the Vikings.
Hey.
And I noted that Venus will be on his natal Mars during the draft. So I thought, well, that's interesting. Could we see the marriage of coach with quarterback, like a Venus Mars thing? They're rumored to be looking for a quarterback to sit behind Cousins for the last year of his contract. They're not renewing his contract. So the rumor is that this is their last year with him. Of course, if he plays just totally balls out, then I guess they've left themselves the room to potentially re-sign him, though they'd be adding void years. And because they kicked his contract already into next year's numbers. So, he's already on the books for next year for $28 million, Cousins is. So the likelihood that he's playing next year, I think their plan, it's from everything that it sounds like, they're either going to get a bridge quarterback next year, or they're going to try to find someone in the draft to sit behind him for a year and get ready. Well, that means they're trading up, unless they're going with Hendon Hooker, whose chart I also have. But he's the only one that would probably fall to 23. He came off an ACL. He was Tennessee's quarterback.
He's old.
25. That's partially due to the COVID years, I believe. Yeah. But anyway, I have Hendon Hooker's chart. I'll show you something about that in a second. But my point is just that if there was any signature that gave me hope that they might actually pick up a quarterback and that we could move into a new era, I don't even care if it's a miserable era. I just can't stand any more of the vanilla Cousins era. That's just me. He's a good quarterback. He's not a transcendent quarterback. And I'm ready to take some shots to have a Josh Allen or a Mahomes or someone of where they're in the MVP mix, even someone like a Justin Herbert. Just a young, talented quarterback. And I don't mind being whiffing and being wrong. We went to the playoffs with Tavares Jackson, with Teddy Bridgewater, with Christian Ponder, and we're not doing much better now with Kirk Cousins than just going to the playoffs and losing. We did the same thing with those guys on rookie scale contracts, and we're able to build out a better roster. So I'm like, well, maybe we should take a risk and move up a little bit. I mean, it'd be astronomical to move up to number 3 where the Cardinals are. I heard it'd be 3 first-round picks and probably a third, or something like that. But if they were to, one thing that I find interesting is Anthony Richardson's chart has the almost the same placement of the sun as Kevin O'Connell, and then he has his Venus very closely conjoined to Kevin's Mars. So they, I was, of all the quarterbacks where you could see a marriage between a coach and a quarterback and a signature of the marriage of coach and quarterback, in their charts, I thought Kevin O'Connell's synastry with Anthony Richardson was pretty good. That would probably mean that they trade up to 3, I would guess.
I think that the only person that actually scares me as a Green Bay Packers fan is probably Anthony Richardson. Like, that guy, I'm nervous about him. If he was to be in purple and yellow, I'd be looking over my shoulder being like, oh shit, this guy could be really good if he hits,
He's got this. Anthony Richardson, by the way, has he doesn't have Venus. He also has Mars and Gemini, almost at the same degree as Kevin O'Connell. So the Venus pairing to me was interesting because it was pairing maybe 2 Mars and Gemini guys together. But he has the sun at 1 degree of Gemini, which means that in the summer of 2025 and the following summer of 2026, he's going to have Uranus on his sun. And to me, for someone who's clearly more of a developmental prospect, like maybe like super high ceiling, but right now, needs to adapt to NFL speed and offenses and whatever, couldn't you see like, okay, he would sit behind a quarterback probably wherever he went for this year. Then you're going into 2024. He has a rookie season in 24. It's probably so. And then 25 and 6 hit, and he's got Uranus on his sun. So I have a sneaky feeling that by 25 and 6, Anthony Richardson, wherever he goes, is going to be a star because it just lines up with his development that way.
I like him.
One more thing, just really briefly, which I really hope that we don't pick Hendon Hooker.
I think the funny part about you bringing up Hendon Hooker is that where O'Connell's natal sun is squaring transiting Saturn. So him getting an old quarterback, Saturn squaring.
Right? Like it's always like, oh my God, we're gonna get like this is like, like when we just like go back and pick up Jeff George again, like. But,
you were talking about plausible landing spots for Cousins too earlier in our talk, like off camera, with like San Francisco potentially being a good fit for Cousins, and then there has been a rumor in the blogosphere, maybe from I don't know, wishful thinking Vikings fans about maybe Trey Lance coming back to the Vikings. So my question for 2 Vikings fans is, what would you think about having Trey Lance versus picking one of these quarterbacks in the draft?
I think my real question is contract wise, getting a mobile guy that has more years of rookie deal, because I feel like for a lot of those guys, the running, you get a lot of running out of them early, and then the passing develops. And when you have fewer of the years for him to be on the field, when the passing develops, then it kind of diminishes their overall value. If it were part of like a Cousins trade, we got a 1st-round pick or a 2nd-round pick, and then we also got Trey Lance because Trey Lance is just gonna throw a fit there or whatever, then that'd be great. And then we have 2 bites at the apple. But just as a quarterback to give up any value just for Trey Lance, that's tough. And he missed a whole year not moving around with a broken leg.
Yeah, I think if they picked up Trey Lance in that trade plus even a 2nd or 3rd round pick, and they were just going to see if Trey Lance worked out, give him a year even, something like that. I'd be into it just because, he is basically very comparable numbers at the combine to Anthony Richardson, just a little bit behind him. And he has a heck of an arm and so on and so forth, but he's played barely any football, like ever. And so it's hard to say what he'll be, but if you're going to gamble on a stock that was once very high and you think could rise again, then like go for it. I don't mind that. I don't mind the Vikings taking any risk. I'm just so sick of vanilla from the Vikings. Just
The Anthony Richardson move would be the same nightmare that I experienced when the Bears traded up to pick Justin Fields. I think I would feel the same way about that, even though it hasn't worked out that well. Justin Fields is still pretty good, and they're starting to build a team around him. I'd be pretty nervous with Fields and Richardson, and honestly, Detroit is building a pretty darn good team over there, and
Yeah.
in the NFC North. And say what you will about Jared Goff, but he's functional, and
Right.
they're putting a real team around him.
Well, he's
But
been to the Super Bowl, and
yeah,
the other thing that I could see them doing, which is sneaky, talking about Bijan Robinson. I think they just signed David Montgomery, but they could pick up. I mean, can you imagine if the Tigers added Bijan Robinson
the
to
Lions.
that? Did I
Yeah.
say,
The
what did I
Lions.
say?
The
That
Tigers.
is my
The
that is
Tigers.
my
Yeah,
number
no,
one fear,
Lions.
because their
Yeah,
offensive line is good too.
Yeah.
I mean, I
Yeah,
really think
exactly.
they're a solid playoff team immediately.
Well,
I
I
do
can't
too.
believe they have such a high draft pick, and they had a good team last year.
Yeah,
So
and I mean the other thing they could do is if
It's the
what's
Rams.
his name, Jalen Carter falls. Can you imagine the Lions pairing
Ugh,
Jalen Carter with
scary.
Aiden Hutchinson?
Scary. Like, that would be
Yeah,
very scary.
I mean they look good, and I don't think Jared Goff is their problem at all. I think
No.
that their defense needs to get better, and they just they need a few more pieces. But I feel like they're ready to
And they have
take over the division for a
Jameson
while.
Williams coming off his ACL year, who is amazing for Alabama in his final
No.
year.
We
So,
traded that pick to the Lions
Yeah.
and ended up getting a cornerback that has not played because of injuries and a safety that broke his leg. So it was definitely not the trade I was happy with last year.
healthy Williamson, Jameson Williamson, and Amon-Ra St. Brown, and whoever else the hell they've got now is kind of getting a little bit frightening to me.
Yeah.
Not to
totally.
just to extend the Lions talk for one more second.
Yeah.
One of the writers I really respect, named Stephen Ruiz, he writes for The Ringer. He can't believe that the Lions have not traded for Lamar, because they have 2
Yeah.
first-round picks this year, and even if they made the earlier one, gave away their second first-round pick, and then gave next year's first-round pick. I mean, imagine adding Lamar to that team with those weapons, with that offensive line. Yeah, they'd have to pay him, but the rest of the team is cheap right now.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, would the Vikings trade for Lamar? What's going on
2
there?
firsts,
Can
it's so
they
much.
afford him or
No,
what?
No, I don't think so, because they've also got it would be more of the same problem, which is that
Yeah.
their salary cap, they're hamstrung by their salary cap situation right now, and so they really just need to move off Cousins and keep moving off some older aging. It wouldn't be surprising to me at all if on draft night, like a Vikings trade I could see on draft night would be any of these 3 players. I think that probably the most likely around the draft or on the draft would be Dalvin Cook or Zadarius Smith, because it doesn't look like they're going to play on their contracts right now. I think they save money if they release them after June 1st at this point. I can't remember, but the third one that would be sneaky, because he's like 29, is Daniil Hunter. I think they could probably get some really good capital for him, and if they're not thinking they're actually going to win a Super Bowl, why keep an edge rusher that's about to fall off the age cliff that's probably worth a first-round pick when you're not going to be using him to get to a Super Bowl? Like, why not take the capital? That's what I think that they should do. But
Well, and one final thought in this whole chain is that don't sleep on Jordan Love. He looks pretty darn good at the end of this last year, and there's been a lot of nice buzz about him over the course of this summer too. I don't think the Packers are going to be at the same level that they've been with Rodgers, and they're rebuilding for sure. But I do think that we've got a pretty decent quarterback who I think will be at least as good as Kirk Cousins in the first year. I don't think that and that's not like a super high bar, but I think that he's going to surprise some people next year. He actually has higher MVP odds than Kirk Cousins right now, which is mind-blowing to me.
If he were a top 12 quarterback his first year starting, he will get so much cash.
Yeah. Yeah. He needs a new contract. So, yeah, I think that he would be in the top 3 of prospects coming out this year. I think that I think they probably would only take maybe Young and Stroud over him potentially, and he'd be equal with Richardson potentially, because of how raw Richardson is, even with the traits. So similar vibe there I'm getting with them.
Well, just one point on Hendon Hooker's chart, and then we can go on to some other stuff. The one thing that I like for him that night is Jupiter squaring his sun, and the moon in his own home sign of Leo I do think he gets drafted on the first night. Like that's as far as I'm willing to bet. I have no idea who will pick him. I think he goes in the first round. I think someone thinks that he can do more. Like, I think there's his draft stock has been rising. He's definitely not I don't think he's a top 10 guy. I could see him going in the 20s to someone.
We took Christian Ponder 12th overall.
Oh my God. Yeah.
I could see the Vikings taking him, to be honest with you.
We didn't mention Will Levis, but that's because, I can't talk about anyone who eats bananas with the peel on or puts mayonnaise in their coffee. So
Will Levis's chart doesn't look that great either. He's like a Cancer sun, and he's got a bunch of exiled stuff too in his chart. So I'm not seeing him as like a star on the level of these other players. Honestly, he's like bulked up in a way that has made me kind of curious about his supplementation before the draft as well.
But his natal Jupiter is in the last decan of Aries, so he will probably get drafted high.
Yeah.
But otherwise, I agree with you.
That is interesting.
Yeah, he feels to me like you remember that prospect that Denver drafted? He was a super tall guy.
Paxton Lynch.
Paxton, yeah. He reminds me of someone like that, where it's like, oh, Paxton Lynch.
I don't know why that lives in my brain. That's
or Josh Whedon. Remember the guy that Cleveland drafted who just looked like a $1 million, threw the ball like through brick walls.
Yep.
Of course, we could be wrong, and Will Levis could be like the next Josh Allen or something, and then we'll all look stupid.
We'll all look really dumb, and you never know. That's the thing.
Eating bananas with the peel on.
It's so funny. Like, I heard a podcaster say this recently, and they were like, it's everyone thinks they have this analysis, and it's such a crapshoot. And then he said something that I thought was actually kind of spiritually profound. He was like, you just don't know, how destiny is going to take control of any of these players, depending on the situation they get in, the coach they're with, the teammates, the window of opportunity. And it's at a certain level, it's just destiny. And I was like, yeah, so, which is why they should hire us. But, okay. So NBA updates, we have a little less time on the clock. We want to make this shorter than a Major League Baseball game. So what do you guys think about the NBA? I think, Kipp, you had some things you wanted to go through.
Yeah, if we have a second to pull up, let me get my screen so I can say. So as Timberwolves fans, I know we make this pretty Minnesota heavy. We had a really fascinating thing happen. Will happen with the Timberwolves. There we go.
They were fists thrown.
Yeah, well, we are looking good, so that means that we obviously have to have something bad happen.
That's right.
So on this night of this game, again, the game's on the inside, we had one player, Rudy Gobert, who has kind of been the story of the Timberwolves season. We traded all this stuff to get this big multiple-time defensive player of the year guy. And really unpredictably, he ended up throwing a punch at a teammate. And when unpredictable things happen, the guy that we look for here is Uranus. And so transiting Uranus is going to be on the inside of this chart. And we notice, and we don't know where Rudy's natal moon is, but it is in Taurus. I think we could be pretty confident of that. We're not moving too many degrees. That is where Uranus is. And we also see Uranus making contact with Rudy's natal Saturn. So the things that make Rudy stable: Saturn in Saturn's own sign, the moon where the moon is comfy, doesn't like to move around, wants to go slow. The great disruptor right here, disrupting Rudy. Rudy throws a punch at probably his most beloved teammate. I think Kyle Anderson, kind of everyone's favorite, slow-mo. Also kind of funny that the moon in Taurus and Saturn in Saturn's home sign, a guy named Slow-Mo gets a punch thrown at them. And then we have Jaden McDaniels, who, if you're a Minnesota fan, everyone knows Ant Edwards. Ant Edwards is everyone's favorite, but everyone loves Jaden McDaniels. Finally got a guy late in the first round. Looks like a stud. So frustrated during the game that he punches a curtain, and unbeknownst to Jaden McDaniels, behind that curtain, just like 1 inch further in, was a brick wall, and Jaden McDaniels breaks his hand during the most important game of the year to allow us to go and play a play-in game. Loser goes home, and so we're looking at unexpected events. And here's our friend Uranus again. Oh, and it's Jaden's natal Uranus exactly square transiting Uranus.
Yeah.
So unexpected things for the Timberwolves. But if you are a Timberwolves fan and supporter, then what you will know is that we cannot have nice things. As nice things look like they're appearing.
No, right. And it's funny because the NCAA men's hockey championship happened just I think it was like a same day. It was the same weekend, and they are up 2-0 and end up losing in overtime to Quinnipiac. And then Monday night, the Wolves, after this whole debacle, even despite losing Jaden McDaniels, who has the best, I think it's like the best numbers on defending LeBron one-on-one in the NBA. He's like an all-star, like all-star defender, Jaden McDaniels. And so they don't go with him into the game. They're still winning by like 7 or 8 points with 5 minutes left to go. And then they let him back in. Minnesota sports are cursed. I've come to the conclusion. There's a curse. It's like the Cubs or the, or in whatever. And the more aware you become of the curse, I think the more exciting it is every year. Maybe this is the year that it gets broken. So that's what I'm buying into right now.
As a Milwaukee Bucks fan, maintain faith, because the Bucks were pretty darn bad for decades and then broke through. So it can happen. And I think that's the beauty of being a fan and the joy of having that hope renewed every year.
The Rudy Gobert trade may go down next to Herschel Walker as the worst trade in NFL or in Minnesota sports history. That was a terrible, terrible trade.
They got Danny Ainge is what happened there. And that guy, do not deal with that guy, because he will take you to the woodshed or whatever.
That's terrible. Yeah, anyway. Well, that's interesting. Keep going, Kipp.
That's really what I have. You also see transiting Saturn making a square to Jaden's natal Saturn. Jaden, hire an astrologer. Like, seriously, your guy or gal advising you would have been like, don't do anything, just too herky jerky today. Try to keep it under wraps. We need to get through this one.
Well, I know that the finals are going to be coming up. The playoffs are starting. That means we have to put the pressure on Spencer to use his technique. We may see maybe we'll see more of it later. Do you have anything you want to start with now?
It's challenging to do this technique so early on in the process, although it worked with the NFL. To full disclosure, I haven't had as much time to prep the NBA playoffs that I did with the NFL.
Next episode.
What I will say, though, I'll just throw this little nugget out there. Just in a cursory examination of the top 6 seeds in each conference, or the top 3 seeds in each conference, the top 6 teams, there's some really interesting placements for the Sacramento Kings coach, Mike Brown. And I'm just going to throw that out there and just see if it flies. He has some pretty interesting placements around the finals. So my initial thought is that maybe the Kings surprise us on some level. But I will look at that more in depth as we get further in the process, for sure.
Fair enough. On a few random things that I'm going to throw up here. One is that I think we talked about this maybe a little bit last time, but to mention Carlos Correa's chart, he is the big twin star that they re-signed after a kind of a big signing debacle that was big news in Major League Baseball. I think it's interesting that you can see coming up, he's got a Mars return. He's already apparently dealing with some kind of nagging issue, like back problem, I think it was. I don't remember. But I just thought to myself, gosh, the month of May is going to be interesting. Here he's going into a Saturn return. He's got a Mars return with the fallen Mars in Cancer. And he's got Pluto squaring his moon. Now, this is a rectified chart, so the moon could be, we don't know exactly where the moon is. But I just thought, at least the Saturn return and the Mars return, there were the Twins would be the ones to be like, well, we don't care what all of these major market teams' doctors said. We don't have major players because we're a small market, so we'll take him, But the Twins have this history of picking up players that end up having these terrible injuries that look like they're like, oh, well, this was a player who was really good. It's like, yeah, but apparently, he has shoulder problems, a pitcher or something. It's always like that with the Twins. So I'm just wondering what the month of May is going. I just want to put that out there that let's come back to Carlos Correa later this spring and just see how he's doing, because I get the feeling that he could be dealing with some injury issues during his Saturn return year. So I just want to put that out there.
Is that Saturn is natal chart in the inside with 7 degrees retrograde in Pisces?
That's right.
Because that's the exact degree that Saturn retrogrades on
Exactly.
June 17th. So,
Yep, exactly.
like,
Exactly. Yeah,
so
he's got that. That's coming up for sure. He's got Uranus just crossed the south node of the moon, and that was happening right around the time the season got started. And then right away, he's got some nagging injury issues. So, anyway, that was one thing I wanted to bring up. The next one I want to bring up, and then we'll close with something that we've all done a little bit of research on. But Jake Paul and Tommy Fury. Now, for a lot of people, you probably don't care about this. To me, I thought it was really just an interesting sports story. So Jake Paul was like I think it was a former Mickey Mouse Club star or like a Disney show star, or Nickelodeon or something like that. And he ended up becoming like this sort of bad boy, super obnoxious guy who, like his brother Logan Paul, started like fighting people. Like Logan Paul actually had like a just kind of a fun match with Floyd Mayweather. Like they like did this thing, and anyway, they make a ton of money doing this stuff, by the way, too.
doesn't Jake Paul also like open Pokemon cards like on a live stream
Yes.
or something
Yeah.
that?
No, he's
What a life.
I don't know how I've stumbled upon this, but I think I've witnessed him opening like high stakes Pokemon packs like on live streams.
And then he fights Floyd Mayweather. I mean, come on.
Yeah, no, that's his older brother. Wait, Logan Paul. I don't know, maybe Logan Paul does it too.
Yeah,
I don't know. They're brothers, so they both do interesting things. But anyway, he started fighting people like sort of YouTube self-proclaimed boxers, and then he started fighting sort of washed up previous MMA stars who really weren't boxers, right? So to make himself look good, but you're like Ben Askren, as we were talking about earlier, he's a really good wrestler. He'd kick his butt if they were wrestling, but he's not a boxer, right? So he's beating these guys and making himself look like, oh, I'm beating all the MMA guys. Well, fight a real boxer, right? So the idea was that he was going to fight Tommy Fury. Now, Tyson Fury is the heavyweight champion, and it's his younger brother, who's an actual professional boxer. So they had a fight. And I thought it was really interesting to look at the charts of both individuals when they fought. Tommy Fury won, though Jake Paul held his own. He didn't get knocked out. It was a decision. But anyway, here's Jake Paul's chart. And what I thought was really interesting is that, and I'll just kind of point it out. I won't actually put the bi-wheel in, but on the night of the fight, the main transit that was close by for Jake Paul when he lost was Pluto on his fallen Jupiter, right? So kind of like meeting this downfall, whereas on the other hand, let me put up Tommy Fury's chart.
Does Jake Paul also represent himself in contract negotiations? Because he has the same Mars-Saturn opposition as Lamar Jackson.
That's funny. Yeah.
Nobody does open the Pokemon cards himself.
There you go.
No, but what's interesting is that he is right now in the middle of some kind of lawsuit over something he was doing with cryptocurrency. Anyway, Tommy Fury is, in the meantime, a 16-degree Taurus sun who had Uranus on the sun when he won. So just like such a simple, tight example of how to pick a winner and loser in a like head-to-head match. Who's got the crappy who's got the crappy transit? Who's got the one that's probably a little bit better for like winning or losing in a situation? Pluto on a fallen Jupiter versus Uranus on the sun in Taurus. So I thought that was remarkable what a showing of the astrology that was. So I wanted to share that. The last thing we want to close with today, and we're going a little bit long, is Angel Reese, the nicknamed the Bayou Barbie. Is that right? And Caitlin, what was her last name?
Caitlin Clark from Iowa.
Basically, these two stars of the women's basketball championship college level. And they squared off, and there was quite a scandal that emerged. And I don't really think it was a big deal myself, but Angel Reese, when she won, used one of Caitlin Clark's taunting things, which she did, which was like that you can't see me, and she did that. But she also, just to be fair, she did it for an extraordinarily long time and followed her around the court, taunting her. And to me, I don't know. I can only imagine in the heat of the moment that you're so amped. You've won. You've beat someone who's kind of like one of the next Michael Jordans of the women's NBA, so to speak, or whatever the equivalent is. I don't know. Diana Taurasi, is that the like Michael Jordan of women's basketball?
Sue Bird, I don't know. Like she's transcendent. Like she brought so much attention. I think that should be mentioned too, is how transcendent of an athlete Caitlin Clark was in this tournament to bring this type of attention to that tournament and whatnot. It was pretty incredible.
Yeah. I mean, so and like, but the point that I thought was really interesting was that so LSU beats Iowa. Caitlin Clark has this amazing tournament, but a lot of it got overshadowed by what I thought was a really stupid debate about if she took the taunting too far. Yes, she did, but it's not illegal to taunt. It's not. I mean, who cares? You know, it's like just let them. I think athletes should just be athletes, and part of what makes sports so memorable is the theater of it. You know, and so I wasn't personally bothered by it. I mean, I did think it went on a little bit, maybe a little too long. You know, maybe a little poor sportsmanship, but I also don't mind it. I'm like, they're in the heat of the battle. And I thought it was interesting that this became such a big deal, that it really stole the spotlight from other stories that were probably more important, like LSU winning, is whether or not this woman should have done this gesture or not and everything. And I don't know, I thought it was kind of, it's just typical the way that we run with stories in ways that it just distracts from the real issues. But the charts of Angel Reese and Caitlin Clark are interesting. Do you want to pull them up, Spencer?
Yeah, I can do that. So we will open up.
What did you guys think, by the way? Did you think it was acceptable, too much? What did you feel?
I feel like attention is attention, and all attention is good. And this is more attention for women's basketball. It was a great game. It was a really good tournament. Caitlin Clark had a great tournament. I think it was a plus for everybody.
All what is that phrase? All press is good press for certain things.
That's how I felt about it.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, I just thought it was a heck of a fun tournament, and I don't usually watch women's sports, to be completely honest. And so the fact that this somehow the moment really captured my attention and I was watching the game, for me, that was significant. So I think you're right. Like, doesn't really matter. The fact is that I think it generated a lot more viewership than usual. Like,
and Caitlin Clark, who talks a ton of smack herself, was having such a great tournament that there were more eyeballs on it. I don't see any drawbacks. I thought it was all great.
And she herself was like defending her. She's like, there's no problem. She should do what she wants to do.
Yeah, I think there was a lot of, honestly, there was kind of a double standard as far as like, I hate to bring this into it, but people were getting on a black player versus a white player doing it. And I think it was a little bit hypocritical for the media that was like, oh, you can't do this or something like that. I agree. I think that they brought attention to the game and forwarded women's college basketball to a point that people are like, wow, this is really exciting, basketball. And it really was a big deal. And I'm actually really excited about Caitlin Clark. She seems like a transcendent athlete, like a mixture of, Steph Curry and, whatever, and LeBron James of that particular, sport,
And no offense, because we don't know our women's basketball stars to make female comps well enough, probably, because there probably are better players to compare them to in the women's league, but
she can shoot the lights out.
That's true. Yeah, like, totally. Yeah. I see. For me, like I didn't think of the race thing so much. Although it's a good point, but I think for me, I can understand why I think people gave it way too much attention. I can understand why people would be irritated by someone following someone around for so long, taunting them. But at the same time, I do think that, like, how is it that big of a deal? People do this kind of stuff in sports all the time. Like so I think on that level, maybe it was unfair, and it could have been a racial thing too. But I did think it was poor sportsmanship on a certain level, but like, I don't know, in the heat of the moment, I don't know. I have a pretty high tolerance for anything in sports like that.
Totally.
People doing the gritty when they score in Justin Jefferson's end zone.
I sort of wish you could stand over someone after you dunk on them now in the NBA.
Yeah. I mean, right. Or when they would tackle people and they would just stand over them.
Yeah, the stare down. That was kind of fun, actually. I mean, I'm sorry. It was kind of,
I can't. You know what I like? I really honestly hope for is that, like, my girls have been asking to go see the Lynx play. So, because they go into the Timberwolves, and then I told them there was a women's basketball team, and they said they will want to go see them. I would really like to see like some of these rivalries that you see, developing in college and seeing them play through. Like, wouldn't it be cool to see Angel Reese and Caitlin Clark going at it for the next 10 years in the WNBA? Here's something that I think is unfair, that women's college athletes, at least for the WNBA draft, have to finish their senior year or whatever it is. They can't be like the men's where they can do 1 year and then go to the draft.
Yeah.
That's absurd. That's a real double standard to me. Speaking of like unfairness.
And another thing I was reading about the WNBA is that even like top 5 draft picks aren't even really guaranteed a roster spot, basically, because there's so few teams in the league, that roster spots are such a premium that they cut like a number 4 overall pick, like right after drafting them recently in one of the teams. So it's really competitive to be able to make that league, and those women are the definitely the best of the best in the world there. So interesting to follow the story of that league as well.
Do you want to bring up Angel Reese's chart?
Yeah, is it sharing?
I'm not seeing it shared.
Okay, let me.
Is it the transits going on in her chart for that night at the during the championship? There's some really compelling stuff. So okay. Nice example of the astrology.
Do you see that?
Yeah,
there we go. So we've got the women's championship game, Dallas, Texas, 2:30 p.m. Central on April 3rd, 2023 on the inner ring. And then Angel Reese is on the outer ring, whose birthday is May 6, 2002, Randallstown with 2 L's, Maryland. So we have the sun conjoining the Uranus of the chart, the Angel Reese's sun conjoining Uranus of the chart of the game. She has a moon Saturn potentially conjunction going on, or at least co-presence. Anything else you're seeing, Adam?
Yeah, I mean, to me, the standout one is that she's got almost the same exact chart date as Tommy Fury, and she's got the Uranus over her sun when she wins. And also, not only does she win and have a breakout moment in her career as an athlete, but she acts Uranian. She breaks the rules that people expect. Well, that's not how you should act. That's the part of it that I don't mind. It's like, who cares how people think you should act? It's sports and it's fun and it's theater. And I like that part of it. Sure. Like I said, I could agree on a certain level that it was like, okay, yeah, you went a little far, but you have Uranus on your sun. I get that. Like, I think it's such a great example of a transit expressing like a super iconic moment in obviously sports history. It'll go down as one, but also like probably in her lifetime. I mean, she mentioned this on Twitter the night after the game. She woke up the day after the game and she had like 1 million more followers or something crazy like that. It was like she just made a name for herself, and good for her. I thought that was a great Uranian expression of Uranus in the sun.
Yeah, and she's got both of those malefics in Gemini opposing Pluto too. Sort of like Gemini feels like a taunting sign. If you have the malefics in Gemini, it's like, oh, you're teasing someone and you're going to get in trouble for that.
Like, that's Stellium in Gemini. Get her to shut up.
Mars and Gemini.
Right.
I have Mars and Gemini natally, and I've been playing a whole bunch of chess.
Oh, no.
And like ever since Mars went into Gemini in August, I started getting into chess, and I've played since October when I really got into it. I've played like 500 matches online. Jeez. And my rating has gone up and so forth. And I started taking some chess lessons too. Nice. So it's been really like a fun hobby to do. And I love the smack talk. It's one of my favorite parts. Like, because you're chatting with people as you're playing them, and like, man, there's some shit talkers out there. And I didn't think I was like, because I've been a long time since I played sports, and I was a competitive swimmer. I played football, but we weren't at the age yet where we were smack talking in like 8th grade, 9th grade, whatever. So when I was exposed to this, I was like, oh, I'm a shit talker. This is fun. I can do this. This is fun. So I've been kind of experiencing that Gemini side of myself too.
Nice. Well, you could see Caitlin Clark has potentially the moon very close to that Uranus position as well on this day. It's not a time chart, but it the moon is within a certain range of degrees, and she was experiencing kind of that Jupiter-Mars experience also.
Oh, totally.
And she had an experience where she was getting some of her shine sort of got a little bit faded potentially by Mars at that point. I'm curious. I'm going to pull this up real quick. if you got a second. I want to see the two of their charts together because they seem like they have some karma with one another potentially.
Yeah, look at those air signs.
Yeah, right. So we've got, both of them have that Pluto natally in Sagittarius. So you can see here that all of that Gemini stellium with both malefics, Venus and Mercury, would be opposing Caitlin Clark's natal Pluto. So there's really some interesting connections with that as well.
I just thought to myself, I bet even though, Angel has that, she's just such a badass, but she does have a moon in Pisces. And I bet you the public response that she received was hurtful more than she would tell publicly. With a moon in Pisces, I find that moon in Pisces people the Gemini is going to be really adaptable and fun and playful. But I bet you there was a certain level at which that hurt her feelings, that people were so shitty to her.
Sure, because she just won the national championship. It should be a crowning moment of glory and happiness, and for people to drag her publicly, absolutely. I bet that was a painful experience. So
she did have some people going to bat for her. That was pretty cool. Like Shaquille O'Neal posted on Twitter, like a bunch of people were really going to bat for her, and so did Caitlin Clark. So, one thing that's interesting about, but I think is interesting is that they have synastry between Venus and Mercury. Mm-hmm. They have a trine between their Venus and Mercury placements, and so they were, I think they probably did some chattering back and forth, and they probably also, I'm guessing they would be friends. I bet you they'd be good teammates if they were played together.
Yeah,
I'm sure they probably have. I mean, these are two elite. They've probably been on national teams together.
Oh, that's true. These kids, a lot of these athletes at this level have been playing in different various national leagues and stuff like that since they were probably pretty little.
I hate to drop off, guys. I got a sick kid. I got to run and pick him up.
No, that's fine. We are at the end anyway, so this is a good ending point. We will let you go, Kipp, and I will do a little sign off for us. If you want to find Kipp on Twitter, it is Eudaimonia Astrology. And Spencer, remind me of, I want to put your handle up.
Yeah, so on Instagram and Twitter, I'm at Spencer Michaud. And then on YouTube, I have Spencer Michaud Astrology, my YouTube channel, where I do a live stream once a week where we go over the new and the full moons and the monthly astrology and do some special Q&As every once in a while too.
IG is Spencer Michaud at Spencer Michaud. Is that right?
Without the H in the middle. Sometimes you always think I have an H in the middle of my name for some reason.
Why I do that? Sorry.
That's okay.
That's random with me. Let me Spencer Michaud. Let me just spell it right. Then we'll say.
Yeah, no worries.
Here we go. So there it is.
There we go.
And then YouTube, you can search Spencer Michaud as well.
Yeah, Spencer Michaud Astrology is my astrology channel.
Okay, cool. So thank you for joining us. Thanks to Kipp, who had to run. This was really enjoyable. We will sign off now and come back to you sometime after the draft, reflecting on it and before the NBA Finals. Does that sound like a good idea, Spencer?
Yeah, that'd be awesome. We'll probably have a lot of trades and picks and maybe more predictions for the NBA at that time. So that sounds like a lot of fun.
Yeah, we'll be a little into the baseball season. The Stanley Cup will be around the corner. Yeah. I'd love to see if you could, I mean, not that any of us are that into hockey, but if you could look at the 8 remaining teams and try your South Node method, that'd be pretty sweet.
Totally. I'm into it.
All right, cool. Well, thank you everybody for listening. We really appreciate. We hope you guys are having a good time and that you were able to enjoy some of these astrological sports insights. And we will see you again next time. Take it easy, everyone.
Take care.
Bye.